to the world. Subscribe now to the Hot 97 YouTube channel. It's Ebro in the Morning with Laura Stiles and Rosenberg.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ebro in the Morning, Laura Stiles, Rosenberg. Here we are again. There's a guy. He's been sitting on a federal representative seat here in New York in 16th District. Now, remember, when we first talked to AOC, there was a man sitting on that district for 20-plus years. In the 14th District, we got AOC in. The guy didn't live in New York. He had moved out of New York. We have the same scenario in New York 16. And the man leading the charge to take that seat right now, his name, Jamaal Bowman, and he's on the program with us right now. Jamaal, what's popping?
Welcome, Jamaal.
Good morning, family. Hello. Thank you for having me.
Now, I want to run through some of your accolades for the voters because the time soon come. When does the vote take place?
So early voting has already begun. It started on Saturday, and mail-in ballots have been going in for a few weeks. But the final day for voting and the election day is June 23rd, which is next Tuesday. We are 8 days away.
You have been an educator and an advocate for public schools for 20 years. You served as principal for the Cornerstone Academy for Social Action, a public middle school that you founded in 2009. That's over in Baychester in the Bronx. You're currently running for New York's 16th Congressional District. You haven't taken any political action money and lobbyist contributions. You've lived in New York your whole life, and you live in Yonkers right now with your wife and 3 kids. The man that you are attempting to move goes by the name of Eliot Engel, who we heard on a microphone trying to get it from Ruben Diaz, saying that he wouldn't even be at the goddamn Black Lives Matter march if it wasn't for the fact that Jamaal Bowman was on his head. And so he showed up and did not know that that was going to be on the mic. This man lives in Maryland. For the last 20 years, lists his Maryland address as his primary address, but represents New York 16 on the federal level as a congressional seat. So here we have another one.
He doesn't even try to fake it. You could at least keep the New York address just for appearances.
Now, Jamaal, let me ask you. I'm
Yes.
sure people have contested this seat before, yes or no?
Yes, that's correct.
How do these things happen where for over 30 years, Eliot Engel holds on to this seat in this district, which represents what section of New York?
So we're talking the North Bronx and Lower Westchester County. So Co-op City, Baychester, Wakefield, Woodlawn, Edenwall, Riverdale, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, New Rochelle, up to Rye, and over to Hastings on the Hudson.
And so how does this guy keep his seat? By doing deals for the rich in that area and people not showing up to vote?
So absolutely right. So Eliot Engel is completely funded by corporate PACs and big donors. Many of those donors reside in the district. So he continues to cultivate and build relationships with certain parts of the district while neglecting the others. He knows that those donors and those voters can throw him not just big fundraisers, but they're going to consistently come out to vote for him. In the last primary, there were 3 other challengers. 30,000 total people voted in that primary. He got 22,000 votes. There are almost 400,000 registered Democrats in this district. So
and only 30,000 people showed up last time.
Correct, right? So when you don't engage the community on a consistent basis, when you're not holding town halls and assemblies, when you're not out and about and making sure everyone's involved in our democracy, you can maintain a seat for 31 years just engaging with the power brokers in that district. Now, so that's what he's been able to do.
Are these the same types of people that make it hard for voters to understand what's going on because it benefits them? Because we've been trying to unpack that here on this show. Because New York State, as liberal as they lie and try to market it, in some ways is very complicit in making voting difficult. Voter suppression is very real in New York State. In Brooklyn, you have voting machines that often don't work. You have people getting purged from voting rolls. These things happen in New York State. Are these the individuals that participate in that?
So the machine is designed to sustain itself. And the wealthy and corporate actors have taken over our political system, both Democrat and Republican. So our elected officials are more beholden and accountable to corporations than they are to the grassroots people in their communities. So take as an example what's happening now with COVID. We're really pushing the mail-in ballot process, and the state is pushing that as well. But what they did was they added an application that people need to fill out and send in before receiving a ballot. They should have just mailed ballots to everyone. Why add the layer of the application? Now, if I live in Westchester and I don't have a computer, if I don't have a printer, how am I going to download the application to fill it out to get my absentee ballot? So it's layers like that, and it's things that they do to maintain the system and the status quo that's in place. But the biggest thing they do is miseducation. You know, I don't know if any of you or many of you went to public schools. I went to public schools my entire life.
Yeah, I went to
and
public
if you
school.
don't learn how democracy works within the K-12 school system, you come out not really being focused on that and more focused on going to a good college, getting a job, you know, buying a house one day and taking care of your family. But in order for democracy to work, we need everyone involved. But because they've kept us ignorant, you only have a certain percentage involved, and that's the percentage that continues to maintain their power.
You have something called the Reconstruction agenda I want to get to. But first, I want to ask you, do you believe there are white supremacists in the police departments operating in New York City and the greater New York State?
Yes, and throughout the entire country. And we need to understand what white supremacy is. It's not just the KKK wearing white hoods and lynching people on the street like they did in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? It's not just that. It's also the implicit bias and the unconscious racism that exists within all of America's institutions. And within our police department, what we see is consistently not just a disproportionate number of Black and brown people being incarcerated, but a disproportionate number of Black and brown people being murdered. And because there are policies in place that allow police to do this with impunity, without accountability, without transparency, it's something that continues. And as you know, Ebro, and as all of you know, the original police of this country were slave patrols.
That's right.
And the culture and the ideology of police departments continues to be rooted in that. Which is unfortunate, because I know there are many that probably go into policing, quote unquote, wanting to do good and do right, you know, for their community. But unfortunately, it's a culture that lives both consciously and unconsciously in every American institution. And that's why from the very beginning, institutional racism was something we targeted unapologetically as a campaign.
Do you support the hashtag Defund the Police?
Yes, sir.
What does that mean to you?
It means a reallocation of resources, right? So we do not need military appareled police in our streets, in our communities. That's a bloating of a budget. The same way we have a bloated military budget, we have bloated police budgets. And my opponent, Eliot Engel, supported the 1994 crime bill, which led to the militarization of the police that we see throughout this country. So it's it's not a surprise that he would say that if he didn't have a primary, he wouldn't care, because he supported a bill like the 1994 crime bill. We need to reallocate our resources toward mental health supports in all of our communities. We need to reallocate resources towards jobs and job training programs, towards environmental justice, towards education, and towards healthcare. Do you believe
that somebody that supported the crime bill in 1994 can admit their mistake in supporting that and be progressive today?
Of course, admit your mistake and then introduce restorative progressive policy that rights the wrongs of that mistake. And that's where our Reconstruction agenda comes in, because one of the first things we talk about is truth and reconciliation. It's reckoning with our history as a country and the impact of racism and slavery on every American institution. So when we talk about Juneteenth as a national holiday, that's one major step in that direction of truth and reconciliation. The same way it happened in Germany, the same way it happened in Rwanda, the same way it happened in apartheid South Africa, we need to look ourselves in the mirror and admit we've screwed up as a nation when it comes to race throughout our history. And now it's time to do something about it. To truly become a post-racial society, we have to continue to engage in the protests that we see throughout the country and elect the right Democrats and politicians into office to write the policy to get it done.
Jamaal, what are some of the other issues that we haven't touched on that affect your area, the Bronx, and what are some of the ways that you want to change it?
Great question. So housing is a huge issue. You know, right now we need 70,000 affordable homes in our district. Homelessness is rampant, particularly in Yonkers. And we have 40,000 people who are severely rent burdened, which means they pay over 50% of their salary towards rent. So we support both Elizabeth Warren's bill and Ilhan Omar's bill to invest anywhere from $500 billion to $1 trillion to build 12 million new affordable housing units across this country, which will ultimately end homelessness and then align our housing to our goal of net zero carbon emissions as part of a Green New Deal. And it would give residents in these social housing units part ownership of their homes, part ownership of their land, and part ownership of commercial real estate that's a part of this particular community. So housing's a big one. Education's a huge one. Our schools are underfunded by billions of dollars throughout the district, throughout the state, and throughout the country. And that's why our plan calls for a quadrupling of Title I funding, which would target historically poor and marginalized communities, fully funding IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Act at the federal level, so we can make sure our children with special needs get the resources that they deserve, building 25,000 community schools, but also focusing more on the unlimited potential and brilliance and creativity of our kids. Like, we continue to try to put kids in a box, and our kids are so much more than the education system we're implementing. So we need to shift our paradigm in terms of how we teach kids and how we allow them to express how brilliant they are.
You have on your Reconstruction agenda, you already mentioned reconcile with our history. You just spoke about let us breathe through historic levels of economic investment. But you have another point here, get off our necks by transforming law enforcement and our criminal justice system. Talk about that transformation. We mentioned defund the police, but are there more layers to unpack for your platform there?
Absolutely. It's a focus on decarceration. We have so many people, millions who are on probation and parole. Once you do your time, you should be done with it. You shouldn't still continue to have to live on probation and parole. Secondly, we have people in prison for technical violations and drug offenses. We need alternatives to incarceration there to give people the mental health supports they need, the academic supports they need, and the vocational training that they need so they can become contributing members of society if they happen to commit a harm against society. So decarceration will lead to a decrease in the need of the police officers that roam our streets. And the reason why this is so important is because historically, we've implemented policy that has created communities of concentrated poverty, like the projects. And in those communities, you have concentrated trauma, which leads to harm. And as opposed to healing that harm, we're bringing in more police. And the police aren't trained in mental health and de-escalation, so they respond violently. And that's why we see the disproportionate number of people being killed. 50% of people killed by police have some form of physical or mental disability. That tells me we need a dramatic shift in how we do policing and public health in this country.
For the audience, the reason you're choosing Reconstruction Agenda as a hashtag and a part of your platform, I'm assuming, is because Reconstruction was an era post-Civil War in this nation that kind of got thwarted, for lack of a better term, or upended, if you will, by white supremacists in this nation, because around the turn of the century, 1900, white supremacists really began to not only disenfranchise and voter suppress and kill and murder and maim and et cetera, et cetera.
Red line,
et cetera. But even deeper are, the Confederate statues that people are talking about taking down now, the naming of Confederate bases and street names and schools. All of that started after 1900. So there was a period of about 35 years after the Civil War where black people were senators, they were voting, they were moving up in society. You hear about Black Wall Street, you hear about Rosewood and these communities that were burnt down by white supremacists. Is that why you're bringing this this wording is because we never really achieved the full Reconstruction.
Correct. If you were Black in this country, we never fully achieved the full Reconstruction. So that's why we're using that word. And you're exactly right. After the Civil War, there was an industrial revolution, and America, in terms of innovation, became a leader throughout the world. And to your point, Black people benefited from that for, a period of several decades. I mean, it's remarkable to think that within, I believe, a few years, there were Black elected officials to Congress after a few years after the Civil War. But white supremacists weren't having it, and they did what they did and terrorized our communities, burned down Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street.
And these were and historically speaking, these were Democrats at the time, Dixie Democrats.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Absolutely right. But and all of that led to a mass migration to the north, where people sought a better life away from the lynching. And then what happened, in economic lynching and economic oppression occurred through redlining and other policies. So that's why we chose that word Reconstruction, targeting and centering racial inequality and economic inequality, and keeping that at the top of the agenda and being unapologetic about that. We have to confront racism directly. We do it through our support of a Green New Deal, which, as you know, FDR's New Deal helped build white wealth and help expand the middle class overall. But our Green New Deal does that for everyone, but specifically targets Black and brown communities because they were kept out of the original New Deal.
But Ebro, it also should be noted, because I feel like these days people look at every opportunity to sort of jump the Democrats, that is before the party switched. Because once the Democrats started caring at all about Black people, all the racists said, this isn't the party for us anymore. And they became Republican. So let's be clear.
I'm a Republican.
Yeah.
It's an interesting history because the Republicans were the ones who pushed the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. But obviously things have changed dramatically.
Do you like a two-party system, Jamaal Bowman?
It's a great question. I don't know if I like it or don't like it. I think in order for it to work, we need everyone involved in our democracy. And right now we are not. If you are poor, if you are immigrant, if you are disabled, if you are Black or brown, the system does not, if you're a woman, the system does not work for you and hasn't worked for you for quite some time. And it's continuing to support itself in keeping the majority of Americans oppressed and the rest of us marginalized. I mean, just look from an economic perspective, right? We have this COVID pandemic that's ravaging the country, ravaging the world, over 100,000 people dead, disproportionately Black and brown. And Jeff Bezos' wealth grew by tens of billions of dollars during that time.
I think it was 16. I think there was like most billionaires.
Most billionaires, right?
It was $460-something billion made.
So when working class folks see that, they just feel like, they feel powerless within that system. And this connects to my education organizing because, I wasn't just a middle school principal and proud to be that. We organized parents, teachers, and students across the state and across the country to push back against the privatization agenda in education. And part of that organizing is all about leveraging the brilliance of our parents and the power of their voices toward making transformative change in education. We need the exact same thing to happen in our political arena. I think it's happening now. And what's so amazing about your show and allowing me to come on and others to come on, I think the hip hop community and hip hop culture overall has tremendous political power that it has yet to leverage. And if the hip hop community leverages it, it's gonna shift the balance of power in this country forever. And I'm looking forward to being a part of that when that happens.
Do you believe that Joe Biden's platform and agenda for Black people in America is sufficient?
No, it's not, but it's moving in the right direction. I think Joe Biden wants to do everything in his power to support the Black community. He's worked with the Black community for a number of years. He's sincere, he's serious, and he's gonna do the work. But he can't do it alone. It's important for all of us to work with him to push him to be bold, to hold him accountable, and not just him, because he's the president. He's going to be the president. Hopefully he wins. We got to get Trump out of there. But we got to look at president, Senate, House, state houses, city councils, county offices, school boards, dog catcher. We got to be involved at every level of our democracy to move it in a direction so that it works for everyone. If we're not, if we continue to just look at president, and I know I was guilty of this growing up, because that's what the media feeds you: president, 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 president. We're only focused there, while there are people taking money out your pocket right there in the city council, and you're not as engaged there. So it's about being engaged at every level of government, but definitely holding Biden and pushing Biden to meet the needs of this progressive movement at this moment.
What do you think's the biggest thing, besides the obvious just sort of tone that's in the White House right now, from a political standpoint? For people who like to say, oh, it's all the same, oh, it doesn't matter. What's the biggest difference you think for you that matters between a Trump White House and a Biden White House?
So I think Biden cares about people, and Biden is not a racist. Trump is a blatant racist, and Trump doesn't care about people, and he doesn't care if people live or die. I mean, I think that was evident during this pandemic. He was, and he's incompetent. He's an incompetent person and leader. So, we were warned about this pandemic. He didn't take it seriously. When it hit our shores, our country, he didn't respond urgently. And then he took a market-based approach to getting supplies to hospitals and resources to communities. It was chaos. People were scrambling all over the place, and we have over 100,000 people dead. I think Joe Biden would have handled that a lot better. I think Joe Biden is going to surround himself with smart people to help him do the job of the presidency the right way. But Trump is a manifestation of everything that's wrong with our country.
That's right.
Too much influence of the wealthy elite, and they created a pathway to Trump going into the White House. And one last thing I want to say is Democrats and Republicans have been complicit in this when they continue to be funded by corporations and wealthy donors and not working for the people in their districts, like my opponent, Eliot Engel.
You are going for New York's 16th congressional district. This is Jamaal Bowman. In closing, talk about how important it was for someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to step out and endorse your run for New York's 16th congressional district.
I mean, it's incredibly important, incredibly humbling. I'm older than her, but I look up to her. She's an incredible leader, a visionary, and fearless. For her to come out, against the establishment, if you will, and support us just shows how much she believes in not just what we're doing as a campaign, but the movement overall. And I don't know if I would be running for office if it weren't for her and other members of the squad who have just created a platform to talk about working people, to talk about the poor, to talk about humanity, and to fight like hell to make transformative change in our country. So it's meant a lot. And even here locally, to be endorsed by State Senator Gustavo Rivera, State Senator Alessandra Biaggi, New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer, Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, all of the grassroots organizations that have endorsed us. We just got the endorsement of the New York Times on Friday. It's all amazing. Very, very humbling. And but we got 8 days, you know what I'm saying? So all this work, we got to pull it out in the end, and things are looking real good right now, and we just hope we can get it done.
Well, we're gunning for you. I like the things you're talking about, and I mean, the current holder of this seat is clearly not in touch with where not only our area needs to go, but where the nation is going. And in closing, you said you had some more words for Rosenberg or something. What happened?
Yeah, man? I got beef with Rosenberg, man. So man. we got to go back to the to the RZA Primo verses. Okay, Rosenberg was very biased towards DJ Premier. He was unapologetic about that, so I appreciate that. But his biases came through, and then Ebro, you allowed his biases to give extra points to Premier when RZA clearly won that battle. Like,
whoa, no.
Yo, man.
It wasn't clear, bro.
No, it definitely wasn't clear.
It wasn't clear because while RZA is phenomenal, I think Premier played to more of a tie. He let it be closer in some ways by his song selection.
They both made some mistakes, but RZA early had a couple that I just was like, why that? Why?
You know what's funny? Like on paper going in, you would think Primo would just kind of wipe the floor with him. And let me just show my bias. I'm Wu-Tang bias all day. So let me just say that.
I mean, aren't we all?
But after I got more respect for RZA after that. Like I always loved him, but after that, I'm like, damn, RZA really got some heat. So that was
right.
So
going into the battle, I thought RZA was much more one-dimensional than he actually is. When you hear the records, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like
very versatile. Very versatile.
He's let me be clear. RZA is definitely as musically gifted as Primo is. I just thought the how big the body of work was for Primo would be unstoppable.
Yo, when Nas's Light came on, like Rosenberg was like, "Oh, nothing could top this." I'm like, "Yo, it's a good record, man." But I forgot what went toe to toe with that. But I think RZA got him in that round. I
think about Nas's Like every day, Jamaal.
Yo, Jamaal Bowman. Get out and vote. The date is June 23rd. Early voting has already started. If you got the mail-in ballot, it should have been sent to your crib already.
And you still have 1 day to go online and request an absentee ballot, which they will let you do for COVID. You don't need to have the regular reasoning.
Absolutely.
And you go to nyc.gov for that, right?
Voting. I think voting.gov, you type in your address.
If you go to bowmanforcongress.com/vote, it breaks it all down for you.
Boom.
There it is.
I like
Bowman.com, BOWMAN.com.
Bowman for Congress, FOR. BOWMANFOR Congress.com/vote.
Bowmanforcongress.com/vote. Jamaal Bowman, it was a pleasure meeting you.
Good luck, man. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Peace and love, y'all.
Thank you, bro. We rooting for you.
Peace, man.
Take care, bro.
Peace.
Thank you.
All right.